I never thought I would be telling this story. 3 years with Allison ended in a flash when she met Jackson, the guy she called her perfect 10. I gave her everything: my time, my heart, my dreams. When she left, I was shattered, convinced I would never recover from the betrayal. What I could not have predicted was how her pursuit of this seemingly flawless man would end up being the greatest mistake of her life. Before I dive into how my ex's upgrade became her biggest regret, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had someone leave you for what they thought was better only to learn a hard lesson. I was 29 when I met Allison, working as a marketing specialist for a mid-sized firm in Seattle. Rain drizzled against the windows of my friend Derek's apartment during his housewarming party when she walked in, shaking droplets from her umbrella and laughing at something her friend had said. "Hey, you must be one of Derek's work friends," she said, extending her hand. "I am Allison. We went to college together." Something about her direct gaze, and the way she actually listened when I spoke, pulled me in immediately. We spent the entire night in the corner of that crowded apartment talking about everything from our favorite hiking trails in the Cascades to debating the merits of independent cinema versus mainstream movies. "Did you see that small theater downtown is playing a restored version of that French film we were just discussing?" she asked as the party wound down. "I have not, but I would love to check it out." "Maybe we could go together," I suggested. Her smile gave me butterflies. "It is a date." Those early months were nothing short of magical. We took weekend trips to the Oregon coast, walking barefoot along the shoreline, making plans for our future. I remember one night, huddled under a blanket watching the sunset at Cannon Beach, when she turned to me and said, "I have never felt this comfortable with anyone before, Wesley. It is like I can actually be myself around you." My modest one-bedroom apartment never bothered her then. She would bring over flowers to brighten the place up, saying it was cozy and perfect for us. I was working hard to advance my career, often staying late at the office to impress my bosses, hoping for a promotion that would help secure our future. Money was tight, but Allison never seemed to mind that we sometimes had to budget carefully for our date nights. Everything began to shift after her promotion at the law firm where she worked. Suddenly, Allison was spending her days with high-powered attorneys who drove luxury cars and vacationed in places I could only dream about. Her new colleagues took long lunches at expensive restaurants and wore designer clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. I first noticed the change when she started posting more on social media. Carefully curated photos of her new office view, elegant business lunches, and selfies with her stylish coworkers. She began tagging her outfits with designer names and seemed increasingly concerned with how things appeared to others. The first major warning sign came during a dinner with her coworkers. We had taken my reliable but aging Honda Civic, and as we pulled up to the valet at the upscale restaurant, I saw her wince. "Could you maybe drop me off and park down the street?" she asked quietly. "The partners might be outside. And well, this car is not exactly making the right impression." That comment stung, but I brushed it off, telling myself she was just nervous about her new position. Later that night, I tried to discuss how I felt with her. "Do you think things are changing between us, Allison?" I asked as we got ready for bed. She sighed, avoiding eye contact. "I am not changing, Wesley. I am growing. There is a difference. Maybe you should think about your own growth, too." Over the next few months, Allison became increasingly distant. My stories about work challenges were met with distracted nods, while her tales of impressing partners and networking with judges received animated retellings. She began criticizing my ambitions, suggesting I should be aiming higher, networking more aggressively, or considering a different career path altogether. During her firm's holiday party, I overheard her talking to a colleague who had asked how long we had been together. 3 years, she answered, then added with a laugh, "But Wesley is still figuring things out career-wise, not like your boyfriend with his investment banking position." Each comment chipped away at my confidence. I started doubting myself, wondering if I really was underachieving. I began staying even later at work, volunteering for additional projects, and applying for positions at more prestigious companies, desperate to measure up to her new standards. I planned a weekend getaway to Portland, hoping to reconnect and recapture some of our earlier magic. I had saved for months to afford a nice hotel and reservations at restaurants she had mentioned wanting to try. But throughout the trip, she was constantly on her phone, responding to work emails and texting with her new friends. "Can we just be present with each other?" I finally asked in frustration after she spent our entire breakfast scrolling through Instagram. "Sorry, but these connections are important for my career," she replied defensively. "You should understand that." When we returned home, I noticed something else troubling. Allison had been deleting my comments from her social media posts. When I would write something supportive or loving it, would mysteriously disappear within hours. When confronted, she claimed the app must be glitching. Our third anniversary should have been a celebration of our relationship. I made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first official date, hoping the nostalgic setting might help bring back the woman I had fallen in love with. Throughout dinner, she kept checking her phone, barely engaging in conversation. "Where do you see us in a year from now?" I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She hesitated before answering. "I do not know, Wesley. Everything is changing so quickly with my career. I need to focus on that right now." Her words felt like ice water running through my veins. For the first time, I truly wondered if we had a future together. The confirmation of my worst fears came unexpectedly. Allison had asked me to take a photo using her phone during a rare dinner out together. As I opened her camera app, a text notification appeared at the top of the screen. "Cannot wait to see you tomorrow. Wesley still does not suspect anything. J." My hands trembled as I handed her phone back, the message burning in my mind. I tried to continue with dinner, but the food turned to ash in my mouth. When we got home, I finally confronted her. "Who is Jay?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "And what exactly am I not suspecting?" Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Surprise, guilt, then oddly relief. "His name is Jackson," she admitted after a long pause. "He is a colleague at the firm." "Are you having an affair?" The words felt impossible to say. "Not physically," she replied, as if that made it better. "But we have been talking. A lot. Behind my back. With someone who knows I exist." I was struggling to process this betrayal. Then came the blame shifting that cut deeper than the admission itself. "If you were more ambitious, Wesley, maybe I would not need to look elsewhere," she said, her tone suddenly cold. "Jackson has a Stanford MBA. He founded his own tech startup before joining the firm. He has goals and vision, and I do not." I asked, feeling as though I was shrinking before her eyes. "Look at your life," she gestured around my apartment. "You have been at the same company for 5 years with barely a promotion. Your idea of success is so limited." That night she admitted she had developed feelings for Jackson. He was 32, came from a wealthy family, had the physique of someone who had a personal trainer and drove a Tesla. Everything about him screamed success in ways I apparently could not compete with. A week later, Allison asked to meet at our favorite coffee shop. I arrived with a knot in my stomach already, knowing what was coming. "I think we should end this," she said, not even bothering with small talk. "We want different things in life. I need someone who challenges me to reach higher, not someone who is content with mediocrity." Her words sliced through me like a blade. 3 years together, and you can write me off that easily? "I have outgrown you, Wesley," she said with finality. "Jackson understands the world I am trying to build for myself. You never will." I watched her walk out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving me with a half-empty cup and the shattered pieces of my heart. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I could barely sleep, lost my appetite, and struggled to focus at work. My performance slipped noticeably, with my supervisor expressing concern about missed deadlines and lackluster presentations. Then came the first social media post. Allison and Jackson at some exclusive rooftop party, champagne glasses in hand, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. The caption read, "Leveling up in every way possible." The comments section was filled with congratulations from her colleagues and friends, many of whom I had considered my friends too. My closest friends tried to help me through it. My roommate from college, Ryan, invited me out almost every weekend, determined not to let me wallow alone in my apartment. My friend Samantha called regularly to check in, offering words of encouragement that I was barely able to absorb. "She did not deserve you," they all said in various ways, but their words felt hollow against the pain. The breaking point came during a crucial presentation at work. I had barely prepared, running on minimal sleep and maximum caffeine. Halfway through, I completely lost my train of thought, staring blankly at my colleagues before excusing myself. I broke down in the bathroom, sobbing uncontrollably, until my supervisor, Michael, found me. Instead of firing me on the spot, he showed unexpected compassion. "Take some time off, Wesley. Whatever you are going through, you need to address it before you can be effective here." My apartment slowly descended into chaos, much like my mental state. Dishes piled up in the sink, laundry remained unwashed, and takeout containers created precarious towers on my coffee table. I had stopped caring about my appearance or my surroundings. One afternoon at the grocery store, I ran into Megan, Allison's best friend since college. She awkwardly avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by the nutritional information on a can of soup. "How is she?" I asked, unable to stop myself. Megan shifted uncomfortably. "She is. Fine. Busy with work. And other things." "You mean, with Jackson?" I said flatly. She nodded slightly. "She moved in with him a few weeks ago. His condo is in Capitol Hill. 3 weeks. It had taken her just 3 weeks to move in with him after ending our 3-year relationship. In my lowest moment after too many glasses of whiskey one night, I called Allison repeatedly. Each call went straight to voicemail. On my 6th attempt, I left a rambling, emotional message that I would regret as soon as I woke up the next morning. 3 years meant nothing to you, my voicemail had slurred. I gave you everything I had. Was I really that easy to replace? She never returned the call. 6 months after our breakup, I experienced what I can only describe as the perfect storm of emotional confrontation. I had finally started putting myself back together, going to the gym, occasionally keeping my apartment relatively clean, and performing adequately at work. I was far from healed, but I was functioning. That Saturday evening, I decided to treat myself to dinner at Luciano's, an Italian restaurant I had always loved but had avoided since the breakup because it reminded me of Allison. I had just received my pasta dish when I heard a familiar laugh. Looking up, I saw Allison and Jackson being seated at a table across the room. My first instinct was to leave immediately, but something kept me rooted to my seat. Perhaps it was morbid curiosity, or some masochistic desire to test my emotional progress. Whatever it was, I stayed pretending to focus on my meal while watching them from the corner of my eye. When Allison eventually spotted me, her expression flickered between surprise and what looked strangely like discomfort. She whispered something to Jackson, who turned to look at me with unmasked curiosity. After an awkward moment, they made their way to my table. "Wesley," Allison said with a forced brightness. "How are you?" Up close, I noticed changes in her appearance. Her clothes were obviously expensive. A designer dress I recognized from the advertisements that used to pop up on her social media feeds. But there was something artificial about her smile, a stiffness in how she carried herself. "I am doing well," I lied, extending my hand to Jackson. "You must be the famous Jackson. I have heard a lot about you." His handshake was firm to the point of being aggressive, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Likewise, Allison has mentioned you." The way he said it made it clear those mentions had not been flattering. The following conversation was excruciating. Jackson dominated, talking about his recent business successes, his connections with various Seattle elites, and their upcoming vacation to the Maldives. Allison nodded along enthusiastically, occasionally touching his arm in a way that seemed more performative than affectionate. Then came the moment that would later define this encounter in my memory. "You know," Wesley, Jackson said condescendingly, "I am expanding my team at Vertex Solutions. If you ever want to do something meaningful with your career, I could put in a word. Always happy to help one of Allison's." He paused meaningfully. "Friends." I mumbled some non-committal response, and they finally returned to their table. I paid my bill immediately and left my food barely touched. Back in my apartment, I completely fell apart. All the progress I thought I had made seemed like a illusion. I sobbed on my couch until 3 in the morning, when in desperation I called my childhood friend Tyler, not caring about the time difference in Chicago. Surprisingly, he answered and listened to my entire breakdown without interruption. "Wesley," he finally said, "I have been waiting for this call." "What do you mean?" I asked, caught off guard. "The call where you finally hit rock bottom and are ready to hear the truth," he replied. "I went through almost exactly the same thing 5 years ago with Heather, remember?" I did remember. Tyler's ex had left him for a wealthy doctor, and Tyler had spiraled much as I had been doing. "You have been defining your worth through Allison's eyes." Tyler continued, his voice firm but compassionate. "Just like I did with Heather. But listen to me. That woman at the restaurant tonight, that was not the Allison you loved. That was someone trying desperately to convince herself she made the right choice." Something about his words penetrated the fog I had been living in. "What did you do?" I asked. "How did you get through it?" "I rebuilt myself. Not for Heather, not for anyone else, but for me," he said. "And that is exactly what you need to do now." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet darkness of my apartment, Tyler's words echoing in my mind. For months, I had been trying to understand why I was not enough for Allison, how I had failed. It had never occurred to me that perhaps the problem was not my inadequacy, but my willingness to accept her definition of success. The next morning I made a decision. I used all my remaining vacation days and some unpaid leave to book a 2-week solo hiking trip in Olympic National Park. I needed complete disconnection. From social media, from work, from the identity I had built around being Allison's boyfriend. Those 2 weeks changed everything. Among the ancient trees and misty mountains, I rediscovered parts of myself I had forgotten. I remembered how much I loved photography, capturing the first light breaking through dense forest canopy. I challenged myself, physically pushing through difficult trails and feeling my body grow stronger. I sat beside glacier-fed streams and finally allowed myself to feel everything: the pain, the anger, the loss, and eventually a tentative sense of peace. When I returned to Seattle, I had clarity I had been lacking for months. I sought out a therapist who specialized in rebuilding after relationship trauma. In those weekly sessions, I began addressing not just the breakup, but the deep-seated insecurities that had made me so vulnerable to Allison's criticisms. "Your sense of self-worth cannot be outsourced to someone else, doctor," Larson told me during one particularly powerful session. "When you do that, you give them the power to destroy you." I reconnected with my passion for outdoor photography, turning it from a hobby into a side business. I created a website, started an Instagram account focused solely on my work, and began selling prints at local farmers markets. To my surprise, people responded positively, and I started getting small commissions. My physical health became a priority too, but not in the desperate way I had tried to improve myself for Allison. I joined a rock climbing gym, finding both challenge and community there. Through climbing, I met people who valued experiences over possessions, authenticity over appearances. Gradually, I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship and my subsequent depression. These were people who had known me before Allison, who reminded me of who I had been and could be again. 6 months after that painful restaurant encounter, I barely recognized the man I had been. My side business was growing steadily. I had moved to a new apartment in a neighborhood I had always loved, but had previously thought was out of my price range. I had even been promoted at my main job, my improved confidence translating to better performance. Then came the phone call that would bring the entire saga full circle. "Wesley, it is," Maya said, the voice on the other end. Maya was a mutual friend who had remained neutral after the breakup. "Hey, Maya. It has been a while. How are you?" "I am fine, but there is something you should know about Allison and Jackson. It is pretty bad." Over the next 20 minutes, Maya detailed what had happened. Jackson's startup Vertex Solutions had collapsed amid allegations of fraudulent practices. He had been using investor money to fund his lavish lifestyle while the company hemorrhaged cash. Worse, he had convinced Allison to not only invest her entire savings, but also to take out a substantial loan from her parents for additional guaranteed returns. He manipulated everyone around him, Maya explained. He isolated Allison from anyone who questioned his business practices. When her parents expressed concerns about the loan, he convinced her they were trying to sabotage her happiness out of jealousy. When the company imploded, Jackson faced potential criminal charges. Investors were suing, and there were rumors of an SEC investigation. Allison found herself not only financially devastated but professionally compromised. Her association with Jackson had raised questions about her judgment at the law firm. She lost her job last week, Maya concluded. The partners said it was a downsizing, but everyone knows the real reason. I sat in shocked silence, processing this information. Part of me felt vindicated, even satisfied, but those feelings were quickly replaced by something unexpected: compassion. "There is one more thing," Maya added hesitantly. "She has been asking about you. She wants to talk." That evening, I received a text from a number I had deleted but still knew by heart. "Wesley, I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk, please?" After much internal debate, I agreed to meet Allison at the same coffee shop where she had ended our relationship 8 months earlier. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see the door. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, image-conscious woman who had left me for Jackson. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, and she wore jeans and a plain sweater instead of designer labels. But the most striking change was in her eyes. The confident spark had been replaced by a look of exhausted defeat. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I would not have blamed you if you had said no. Honestly, I almost did, I admitted. She nodded, staring down at her coffee cup. I deserve that. I deserve much worse, actually. Maya told me some of what happened, I said. I am sorry you are going through this. Allison looked up surprised. You are sorry. After how horribly I treated you. Being hurt by someone does not mean I want to see them suffer, I replied. Tears welled in her eyes. I do not deserve your kindness. I was so cruel to you, Wesley. I threw away 3 years of real connection for what turned out to be a complete fraud. Over the next hour, Allison detailed her nightmarish experience with Jackson. Beyond the financial devastation, she described his controlling behavior, his constant criticism, and his skill at making her doubt her own perceptions. He had systematically cut her off from friends and family, framing anyone who questioned him as enemies of their happiness. When his company started failing, he became desperate, she explained. That is when I saw who he really was. Angry, manipulative, willing to lie to everyone, including me. When I finally confronted him about the discrepancies in his business, he told me I was too stupid to understand his vision. She wiped away tears. The worst part is, I let him convince me you were the problem when you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I threw away genuine love for a fantasy that turned into a nightmare. Then came the words I had once thought I wanted to hear more than anything. I miss you every day, Wesley. I know I have no right to ask, but do you think we could try again? Start fresh. I have learned so much, and I promise I would never take you for granted again. 6 months earlier, those words would have sent me sprinting back to her without hesitation. But sitting there looking at this person who had once been the center of my world, I felt something unexpected. Compassion, without attachment. Allison, I said gently, I forgive you. Genuinely. But we cannot go back. Because you hate me now, she whispered. No, I said, surprised to discover it was true. Because I finally understand that we would never have worked long-term. You needed to learn some hard lessons, and so did I. I needed to learn my worth is not determined by someone else's assessment. She broke down then, sobbing quietly in that corner of the coffee shop. I reached across to touch her hand briefly, a gesture of comfort rather than reconnection. You will get through this, I assured her. It will be hard, but you are stronger than you realize right now. Rebuild your life for yourself, not for anyone else. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Allison hugged me tightly. You really are an incredible person, Wesley. I am so sorry I could not see that when it mattered. It mattered, I replied, just not in the way either of us expected. Walking away from that meeting, I felt a profound sense of closure. The pain that had defined so much of my past year had transformed into something valuable, wisdom I could not have gained any other way. In the months that followed, my life continued to evolve in positive directions. My photography business grew steadily, culminating in my first gallery exhibition, featuring landscapes from my healing journey in Olympic National Park. My day job offered me a leadership position with a significant salary increase. Not that money defined my success anymore, but it was a validation of my professional growth. I even developed a friendship with Natalie, another photographer I met through a local arts collective. Our connection was built on mutual respect and shared passions rather than superficial attraction or social status. Whether it would develop into something more remained to be seen, but I was in no rush to define it. Perhaps most surprisingly, I rebuilt a tentative friendship with Allison's brother Marcus, who had always been supportive of me even during the breakup. He called one day out of the blue to tell me how sorry he was for what had happened. I always thought you were the real deal, he told me. I'm glad to see you thriving now. Through Marcus, I occasionally heard updates about Allison. She had moved back to her hometown temporarily, was working to pay back her parents, and had started therapy to address the patterns that had led her to value the wrong things and the wrong people. I genuinely wished her healing and growth. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter was learning to recognize authentic connections versus superficial attraction. I became much more attuned to people's actions, rather than their words or appearances. I surrounded myself with friends who celebrated my successes without competition and supported me through challenges without judgment. Last week, my friend Derek, the same one who hosted the party where I first met Allison, called me for advice. His girlfriend had left him for a colleague who seemed more successful on paper. I feel like I will never be good enough, he confessed, echoing my own thoughts from a year earlier. The right people will not make you feel that way, I told him. And sometimes losing someone is the best thing that could happen to you, even when it does not feel like it. I shared my story with him not to center my experience, but to offer perspective that only comes from walking through fire and emerging stronger on the other side. Life continues to unfold in ways I never could have predicted when I was curled up on my couch feeling worthless after being discarded for someone better. That painful chapter was not the end of my story. It was barely the beginning. Have you ever experienced something similar in your relationships? The pain of being left for someone who seemed better on the surface? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more authentic life stories. And if you know someone who might be going through something similar right now, share this video with them. It might just give them the hope they need today. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see your value.